Hello everybody, Robin Nichols back with some more information about the tools inside Photoshop Elements. So I thought I'd start off with this rather interesting shot of two sumos just about to leave the ring, and neither of them quite rightly wants to leave the ring first because they're going to lose the match. Photoshop Elements has a massive amount of tools, and by tools I mean things to make your pictures look good. There are in fact dozens of tools that you probably never even know are there. There are loads of tools that probably are too esoteric. We're going to look at the main tools that will make a significant improvement to your image quality, and they're fairly easy to use. The first one, and this applies to all editing, is a brightness and contrast one, and it's called Levels. We can use the keyboard shortcut Control or Command L. If you're not a keyboardy shortcutty sort of person, we can go to Adjust Lighting and choose Levels, and there it is. So this will be very familiar to a lot of you because on the back of your camera, lo and behold, you have a similar looking histogram, and this is just a tone map showing me where in the picture the tones are. I kind of know that most of the tones are actually down the bottom end in the shadow end. The shadow end is on the left hand side, and that's why we've got this big peaky mountain. The shape of the mountain is irrelevant, it's the amount of tones down there. So up at the right hand side where the highlights are, there's very little. There's a little bit of highlight on this gentleman's footwear, the armband, the wristband, the salt, and a few dentures in the audience. As you can see, a lot of people got their mouths wide open going, oh my god, he's going to go out of the ring. And it just reassures me that thank goodness I didn't pay full price to go and sit in the front row to have a 200 kilo monster come flying into my lap, as these two people in the front did. Besides, anyway, that's beside the point. So if we're looking at here, I'm thinking I'm just going to try the auto button. That's not bad. It kind of cleans up the color a little bit. If you're not sure, we can press reset, or we can turn the preview on and off just to get an idea. The brain plays funny tricks on our mind sometimes, and we can look at something and go, God, that looks terrible. We can fix it, and then we can kind of promptly forget what it used to look like. So it's really good to go backwards and forwards to see what's happening. So it's clear to me in this I've got the white balance completely wrong, and I wish I'd shot this in the raw file format because it would be easier to clean the color up. But we'll have a go using Levels. So that's not bad. That's a little bit better, and it's taken out a lot of red and a bit of yellow. In fact, it's almost verging on the 2 cyan at the moment, but let's just leave it at the moment. If you don't use the auto button, you can actually get in here and change the color channel. So as I said, I thought it was a bit too red. So if I go the other way, we add the opposite of red, which of course is cyan. I've got to be a little bit careful here. It also may be a little bit too yellow, so the opposite of yellow is blue. So, yeah, so I can probably add a little bit of blue. Clearly, you can add too much and it just goes hideous. But generally, something around there, and again I'm going to preview off and preview on, thinking, well actually no, we're going in the right direction. I'll go back to RGB and generally make the whole picture a little bit lighter. He's going, no, after you, no, after you. No, I insist, you get out of the ring. And something like that. And I'm going to check that, yep, so that's a significant improvement just using Levels. So that's actually very easy. A lot of the time you could choose, let's just say, reset and cancel. A lot of the time you could just choose auto smart tone, and you may find that that does an amazing amount of control. And here's actually the auto smart tone window, and as it says here, you move the controller around to fine tune the image correction. So we can do something like this, and you can see it kind of just gives you a patchwork of possibilities. Now that's way too much, way too much, way too much. So not sure. It's kind of clever actually, the smart tone. I have to say auto smart tone is actually not bad. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist. I prefer to just use, let's go before, after, to use the Levels because I can see what it is. I've been using it for years, but the auto smart tone, not bad. I'm going to cancel out of that, but what I would do is I'd probably avoid things like auto Levels, okay, because auto Levels sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Auto contrast sometimes works, sometimes makes no difference at all. So the point of being is, if something doesn't work, you think, well, what am I going to do next? And there's a real danger that you pile one effect on top of the other, on top of the other. In the end, you've got 27 different effects on the picture. It may begin to look good, but as you can see here with my Levels, once I've finished playing around with Levels in a JPEG format, you actually damage the picture. Let's just move this off the photo. You damage the picture because in a JPEG, which is only an 8-bit file, there's actually not enough information for us to create. Let's just put a bit of blue in here. There's not enough information for us to create a lot of wiggle room, a serious amount of editing. That's why raw files are so good. You can. And you can see here, and I'm going to say OK, and then bring levels back. You can see here I've split some of those tones because I've had to stretch them out across the tonal range. We're running out of ammunition. We're running out of pixels, basically. So this is called combing, and we basically damage the picture. It's probably going to be impossible to see where the damage is unless we've got a highly developed, perfect raw file in comparison next door to it. But you get the point that with a raw file, you get a lot more information and you get much more sort of wiggle room when it comes around to editing it. So levels, all in all, is a very powerful tool. We also have, and I'm actually going to reset this, I'm going to cancel this, I'm going to go to the edit menu and choose revert to go back to my original picture because I want to show you a couple of other things. Levels also has a number of little pipettes or eyedroppers, and this allows me to set the white point, the grey point, or the black point. What the heck is all that about? What it really means is, let's assume that the salt in the salt cellar here down here is white. So if I click it, it then says make that white, and everything else gets globally adjusted as well. And that actually worked quite well. Let's reset that. It looks distinctly muddy. Go back to the salt, click again. We could try clicking on this gentleman's white thongs. Makes no difference. We could click on his tummy. Makes no difference at all. Let's just reset that. Okay, we're making no difference at all, so I'm going to reset that again. Press Control L, go and click in the salt. Okay, now it brightens it up quite nicely. If we undo that, click on his little footsie there. Doesn't seem to work on his foot, which is a bit weird. Okay, let's try it again. I'm going to click on his stomach. There we go, click on his stomach. And that's going to overexpose everything, simply because I've said any tone that's stomach coloured, make it go white. He doesn't like it, I don't like it, nobody likes it. We could try grey because that's more stomach colour. There we go. But it actually changes it a different colour. And it changes it to a different colour because the pixels we clicked on are not necessarily all stomach colours. You can see they're multicoloured. So we may choose a magenta one, a green one, an orange one, a brown one, and that's why it resets the colour so violently. So it's a tool that works occasionally quite well. Occasionally it goes completely pear-shaped. I think that's the best one. Using the white picker in the salt, we get a kind of a cleaner looking picture. But still, I'm going to have to go and probably take some of that yellow out. Yeah, it really is a bit too yellow. Okay. So, fantastic. The lower output levels is there to reduce contrast. Reduce contrast, especially if I'm in RGB. There we go. So I can reduce the contrast, and what that does is literally make it go muddy or a little bit more sort of pasty. Quite handy if you're shooting in very bright sunny conditions. Doesn't really make any difference or any positive difference when we're shooting indoors at a sumo grand national tournament. Okay, let's move on and have a look at another tool which is also appropriate for this, and that is Hue and Saturation. Again, we find it under the advanced enhance, adjust color. There we go, adjust color, adjust hue saturation. Control or command U. I love this tool because it's very, very handy. Let's say we've got the brightness looking good. The second tool we use, of course, is Hue and Saturation. And the saturation in its main descriptive is simply 0 minus 100. Saturation is 0 color, basically black and white, or we can crank it up and add more color. Be careful with this because it won't print correctly if it looks that hot. But the real strength of this tool is twofold. I can colorize. What that does is allow me to just put single tones into the picture, like a sepia, okay, or I can make a yellow and white, green and white, blue and white, purple and white, etc., etc. So you can have fun doing an old-fashioned look. But even better than that is this. It allows me to choose. Now, what's the worst color in this? It's probably yellow, isn't it? So I'm going to choose yellow, and I'm going to click on his chest measurements there, his large chest measurements, and I'm going to reduce, just actually telling me it thinks it's a type of red, and I'm just going to reduce the color. Wow, look at that. So it actually takes that color plus all the other areas that have got that red in it, and it reduces the color. So the purple, the violet, the green, the black and the white is not changing at all. It's just I'm just stripping out some of that heat in the picture. So if I preview off and preview on, you can see you can really improve, or basically improve the color by getting rid of the rogue color. In this case, of course, it's a red-yellow combination, and that's a fantastic improvement. And that's using this hue and saturation. It's a very powerful tool. Here's another example I've just pulled out of my picture library, simply because it's kind of selected for me. And if again I'm using this hue and saturation tool, I can do this. I can exemplify. In fact, I've probably done this already, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to choose what I think are greens, and I'm just going to click on the green window here. And then we can desaturate it, and you think, well, actually that's not bad, it's not bad at all. Or we can increase it, so we can literally, like turning up the electricity inside this little enclosure area. What it's also going to do is change the greens in the rest of the church, or the shrine in the background. So I don't really want that, so I'll just show you a little trick here. We can combine a selection with hue and saturation. We do this very simply. Because there's no green very close to it, I can actually just draw a very loose rectangular selection. I can feather it, and this is a 30 megabyte file, so I might feather it 33 pixels, quite a bit. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to hide that selection just so we don't pay any attention to it. Go back to hue and saturation, and go back to what I think are greens, and click in the green window, and then increase the saturation. So you can see it makes absolutely no effect on the colors off to the left hand side because it's behind that selection. So I'm limiting the action here. Fantastic. So I can even make it go black and white, or I can make it go almost like we've turned up the light bulbs inside this place of worship. So quite interesting ability to control the spread of color or enhancement using a combination of the hue and saturation and a very simple and easy to use selection. So let's click OK on that. So a little bit of fun. Another way of dealing with it, I'm going to go back to Mr. Sumo here, because we've got a couple of other very good tools that allow us to clean up skin tones. Again, the first tools we use are levels. The second tool is probably hue and saturation. If you're having a hideous problem with, say, color, we've got a tool called Remove Color Cast. Guess what that does? It's very similar to the eyedroppers, because essentially we need to click on somebody's stomach or the white toe caps. Here we go. And you'll find, again, by previewing it, you can clean up the color quite nicely. If you obviously make a mistake and you click on the wrong bit, you're going to get a hideous result. You think, wow, this is no good. But eventually you'll find a good combination. The main problem I find with this particular tool is when you hit on a combination, you think, oh, just try one more. And of course, it's very hard to go back any stages. You know, so you've actually got the perfect one. You think, oh, I'll just try it one more time again. Bang, and you've lost it. So it's very hard. You can't control it. It won't allow you to go backwards. So you have to make a decision. If you like it, go for it. I don't like that one at all. I think clicking on his foot's probably, or clicking on his bandage is probably the best way to do it. Or even on his chest. No, I think on his bandage. There we go. Let's preview. Always use the preview, because your brain is going to say, no, no, that looks fine. Of course, it doesn't, because it makes so many allowances for that environmental color that's happening here. Fantabulous. And let's click OK and save it. Good. So as you notice here under the Enhance menu, there are a couple of other very nice little features. There's one called Remove Color. Gee whiz, what does that do? Well, it takes the color out. But we'll get on to black and white in a moment. There's always a joke around town that if you get 10 photographers in a room and say, look, here's a photo, show us how you convert it to black and white, they'll come up with 13 different ways of doing it. And it's probably quite true. There are many, many ways of doing it. You can also adjust color for skin tone, and this is a very curious one, but I also use it occasionally because it says click on any person's skin. It doesn't say click on a Sumo person's skin. Okay, and then we can add a bit of suntan, a little bit of suntan, or we can take a bit of suntan out. There we go, tan, or we can add a bit of blush. It's very odd, so it's gone a little pinky magenta, or we can take that out. Very, very strange, but actually for beauty photography, beauty retouching, it's actually quite good. Probably doesn't work quite so well on sumo wrestlers. All right, finally in this little segment, I want to show you a very, very nice little feature. In fact, we'll go back to this picture. It's one of my favorite shots. We'll go back to this picture. I'm going to convert this to black and white, and I think that's an absolute sin, isn't it? But I'm going to show you how it's done. Again, we go up to the Enhance menu, but we keep on going down, and we go to Convert to Black and White. Now, one of the problems I have with Photoshop Elements is the preview windows are pretty small. As you can see here, it's doing weird things because I've still got my selection running, so I need to enhance, turn it off and go back to enhance, convert to black and white. What we do with this, and a huge piece of advice I think which will really help you, is ignore these little recipes. These little recipes are cool. Everybody goes, wow, that's really cool. Let's do that. Let's go with infrared. Fantastic. But what happens, of course, with something like this is it's very punchy and you lose a lot of detail because it's so punchy. So the principal use of this is simply to convert it to black and white using the lowest common denominator, the most boring looking conversion. And I'll just do this off camera here so you can see what I'm doing here. Scenic landscape. Actually, they're all pretty good, I have to say. But that's pretty grungy. If it's not grungy enough, i.e. if you're still getting blown out highlights, you can fiddle with the sliders. Maybe pull it down a little, even something like that is probably quite good. Okay, and as a tip when you're using these sliders, they're a bit weird. If you push one all the way up there, another one, corresponding one, has to go the other way about the same distance, or a combination of the two, in order to maintain the same brightness. So you can see how I've visibly pushed up the contrast. So I actually want to keep the blue slider down a bit because otherwise it's going to get way too contrasty. So we want a picture that's a bit muddy. That's a bit too muddy, Robin. Less muddy, less muddy. Something like that. And I'm going to click OK. It's a two-stage operation, folks. Do not think that's the end of the day. We go back and choose levels, and then we finish it off in levels using this. There we go. So I can just brighten that up. I can brighten the whole picture up and then pull the shadows down and make them go darker just to pump up the contrast. So that's my original picture and that's my new version, and I can click OK. Now, as a final comment, the two unsung heroes of this program are called burn and dodge, and these are local tone controls. So as you all know, these are all global. Hue and saturation, levels, everything is global unless we combine it with a selection. These little fellas are just brushes, and we can brush in some darkness or brush in some lightness. Let me show you how they work. We can separate the brushing action to affect only the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights. I'm going to choose shadows. I'm going to choose a very slow 15%. That's the speed of the brush. And I'm just going to darken down these pillars. But you can see it doesn't actually darken down the pillars. It darkens down the shadows. So it will only affect what is already there. It won't put shadows into the picture. I can probably darken down a little bit of the carpet here. And I can darken down some of the rest of this amazing building here. There we go, like that. Conversely, I can choose dodge. And I'm going to dodge the highlights. These tools often work very, very quickly unless you've got that exposure setting. Exposure is a dumb name. It really means speed. So I'm going to lighten up the marble. So remember, I darkened down the dark bits, which are the shadows, but I'm just going to lighten up the marble a little bit. So it's going to just only or mostly affect the highlights in the marble, basically pump up the contrast on this chap's t-shirt, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go back to burn. You can be doing this all night long actually because it's fantastic. I'm going to burn in the midtones, just in the back, and to get an evenness of burn as it was, get a really big brush and basically just darken down that background area there. There we go, make it very moody. Oh, I can feel the mood coming on, isn't that good? There we go. I'm going to go back into my dodge tools. Again, just dodge some of that mid-tone there. There we go, just to lighten up the marble around here. So you can carry on ad infinitum, lightening and darkening little selected areas just to create an amazing effect. So we used to do this in the wet bench darkroom with bits of paper and bits of sticky tape, and you'd spend hours sloshing about, adding more exposure, taking exposure away, masking stuff. It was all entirely unpredictable. You'd wait 2.5 minutes in the developer and you go, oh God, I've got to go and do it again. So you go and do it again and you get a completely different result. This way it's actually brilliant because you see it happening and you can go backwards and forwards until you get the right combination. These are the unsung heroes of this program. Finally, we have a tool called the sponge tool, and again, instead of global, this is just local color enhancement. It will only saturate color that is already there, or conversely, it may desaturate color. So I'm going to turn the flow up, and I'm going to desaturate some of the colors in the cafe, like this. As you can see, they're a little bit on the slow side, which is good. You don't really want to go like a steam train because that's going to be unpredictable. It's going to give you sort of unpredictable. There you go. So I'm just knocking back some of the colour to leave the 2 cups of tea sitting on the table in front of me highlighted. Don't forget to use the square brackets on the keyboard just to make some of the brush sizes go bigger or smaller, and you can see here it's working. Eventually the pictures of the people in the background are going to go black and white, but I prefer to leave them, I think, a little bit colourful because it just emphasises the 2 cups of tea in the foreground. And that's the sponge tool. The sponge tool, as I said before, has a forward and backwards gear. Fantastic tools. In fact, I think the sponge, the dodge and the burn are the unsung heroes of this program because they allow you tremendous creative input to creating fabulous looking pictures.